Well, we left the show, like 2 years ago?
3 years ago.
3 years ago now. Because basically our family goals that we had for ourselves didn't align with what we found out. That like we ended up finding out like we didn't have as much control over our lives as it related to like the show and stuff as we felt like we needed. So we had to make a decision at that time to kind of put the show aside just to like pursue our own goals and everything. So
from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It's Monday, November 1st. I'm in my cozy white sweater and I'm ready to get started on a very busy week. I hope you had a great weekend and a wonderful Halloween, and we are rip-roaring into the fall. We've got comfy sweaters, pumpkin spice lattes, and everything going on here. We are going to be moving into a period of heavy Duggar content on this channel. So FYI, if you see a lot of Duggar videos, that's because we have a lot of people coming forward sharing their stories, and we have a lot to dissect. Josh's trial is also this month, so we are going to be going a lot deeper into what got us to this point, what's the actual backstory of what happened way back when, how did we get to where we are today, and also talking a lot about the girls. This video today is going to be about Jill Duggar. We'll have one coming up about Anna, and then we're going to go into some more information about Josh's upcoming trial in our third installment. Hang on tight. This month is going to be a very bumpy ride. Okay, so Jill Dillard went public last year in a series of Q&As in her YouTube channel. And it all started when Derek Dillard started making comments when the last season of Counting On premiered. He started going off sort of about all the different factors about the family, how Jim Bob was leaving them out of certain family events, how Jim Bob had not paid them. And he talked specifically about an opportunity that had been snatched from them and how this sort of led them to reevaluate what was going on with their world of Counting On. So if you follow Jill on her YouTube channel, you know that she actually addressed parts of this in one of her Q&As. In the Q&A, she answered questions about whether or not, if she missed filming, why they decided to leave filming, and then they also talked about a missions trip. So this is what Jill had to say about why they decided to stop filming.
Basically, our family goals that we had for ourselves didn't align with what we found out. That like we ended up finding out like we didn't have as much control over our lives as it related to like the show and stuff as we felt like we needed. So we had to make a decision at that time to kind of put the show aside just to like pursue our own goals and everything. So yeah, that's when we made that decision, and it was just like a good decision for us. And
in the same Q&A, Jill also addressed questions about if they missed filming or whether or not they would continue filming or go back to filming, and they responded by saying this.
Yeah, we will not go back on the show under the circumstances that we were under at the time that we left, meaning just as a family, we have to be able to make decisions that allow us to navigate our lives and have the
information and control over our lives.
The information and control so that we know whether or not we can even plan anything for our lives or not.
And then finally, Derek addressed how their mission work played into all of this. So here's what he had to say about this.
But unfortunately, as we were pursuing longer term international missions placement, that opportunity was taken away from us.
So we know that Derek and Jill, when they first met, Derek was in the missions field. He was in Nepal and he was working, and missionary work was extremely important to Derek. So for the first 2 years of their marriage, they were actually in Central America and they were working in various missions. They were in different countries and it was a very war-torn place. There was a lot of instability and they eventually came home after fears for their own safety. They worked really hard to get this opportunity to go back into Central America, but it turned out that they were not able to do so because of a contract that they had signed, and it prohibited them from taking this opportunity. Well, now I have a few bits of details that have not previously been released that I can share with you about what sources say happened. So according to a source I spoke to, Jill had planned to go to El Salvador, and Derek and Jill had been working on this opportunity to do a missions trip, do a long extended program or in El Salvador. And when they were offered the opportunity and they were ready to get going, they spoke with Jim Bob about their options and about going forward because of their contractual obligations with the show. And Jill and Derek were told by Jim Bob in no uncertain terms that they were not allowed to go because they had to continue filming the show. So this decision by Jim Bob to not allow them to film precipitated them finding out more information about what actually they had signed. So Jim Bob says, no, you can't go. You have to film for the show. Derek and Jill are left heartbroken because they had worked really hard to get this opportunity. It turns out that right before Jill was married, she and Derek signed a contract. It actually happened on the day of her wedding. And according to my source, Jim Bob had told Jill that she needed to sign a piece of paper, and he explained it to her that what she was signing was actually a document for how she was going to get paid with the network. At the time, it was apparently on her wedding day, and so she wasn't necessarily super focused on what it was she was signing. It was more just like, I was told how it played out was Jim Bob was like, hey, you need to sign this, and she signs it, and then that's how it is. She just figures this is how we're going to get paid for this. Well, it turns out it was in that contract that she was going to be on the show and that she wasn't going to be able, she had specific obligations she would have to meet as a part of that. And because of those contractual obligations, which she was not aware of because she did not see the contract, and Jim Bob allegedly just asked her to sign it, it was that where she felt like she had been deceived. What happens next is when she and Derek realize, okay, we've been deceived about this. They had already been deceived about Josh. They had found out after Jill had done the Megyn Kelly interview that Josh lied about what was going on in his life. And I think that was sort of the precipitous for Jill, and the floodgates began opening. And I'm told that's when Jill started asking a lot of questions. So when Jill learns about the contract and that she signed this without really her knowledge and under the pretense that it was just for the payment, she starts, like a floodgate opens, she starts asking questions about pretty much everything. And as she starts digging into this history of the family and her experience in the family, she starts learning truths that she apparently had no idea about, different aspects of her life where she had felt like she was being misled. So as she starts learning more and she starts asking questions, she starts asking her dad questions. And my sources say Jim Bob and her were having conversations about what was going on about this contract. This contract was a huge problem, but then there was also aspects of them wanting more control in their life and Jim Bob really saying no. They were also not getting paid, which was another sticking point for Jill because she wanted to be paid if she was going to have to give up opportunities. And apparently this was another argument which led to apparently Jill and her dad going and getting lawyers and her having to get a lawyer in order to get paid, which is another thing that she has openly discussed on her YouTube channel. So when she hires the attorney and she basically gets paid like minimum wage, she says, it becomes this space where nothing, like right is left, up is down, everything is very confusing for her. Okay. During this time, as her and her dad are having disagreements about her life and what she wants to do with her life, Jim Bob suddenly deems Jill a danger to the family. And this is a part where this is actually really sad if you think about it. So my sources say that once Jill started confronting Jim Bob about the show, about payments, about control in her life, specifically Derek and her wanted the opportunity to make their own choices for their family. They wanted to be able to announce their own things in their lives. They didn't want to be bound to a contract on a show where they weren't even getting paid. That created a lot of chaos for Jim because he had been running a very tightly controlled ship. And it was his limiting the information to the kids and limiting any knowledge about the way the contracts worked, limiting information about how the show worked, that ultimately gets Jim apparently kind of, panicky. And my sources say at this point, Jim then decides that Jill is dangerous. So he then effectively labels Jill as a danger to the family. I'm not even kidding. My source said he referred to her as dangerous. So when this happened, she has a conversation with her dad where he calls her dangerous or something of the sort, according to my sources. And then Jim Bob tells Jill that she is not allowed to come over to the house, something that she has spoken about publicly. And he says that he cannot go to the house without his permission. And on top of that, he limits communication, I'm told, with her mother. So she also cannot speak to her mother, according to my source, unless she has permission with Jim Bob. So she is, in a sense, sort of shunned from the family at this point because she asked questions to Jim Bob and wanted more information, and he didn't want her to influence her other siblings. Now, the sources, when I said, well, why would he be labeled dangerous? What is this about? My sources say this. Jim Bob has been running a very tightly controlled life for years. The kids don't have a lot of access to anything. They control social media. They control their phones. I mean, even some of the adult children are controlled. Their finances are controlled. Even the adult children's financial lives are controlled by Jim Bob. He makes decisions about who gets money and who doesn't get money. And if you do these things for me, you get money, according to my sources. If they follow what Jim Bob wants, they might get rewarded with, say, a house or something that they need in their lives instead of payment. So with Jim Bob sort of dictating how people are paid and payment comes with strings attached, Jill learns this. This creates a, danger for Jim, but it's also because Jill then starts questioning every other aspect of her life. And as she starts whittling through all of these things, she learns that there's things from legalism that aren't even biblical. She starts to learn that, she can wear pants. She can get a tattoo if she wanted to. She hasn't. She could get her nose pierced. She could maybe have a job if she wanted to. A lot of things that she had learned growing up, she realized maybe weren't actually the truth. And when you start to dissect the fact that, oh, this part wasn't true, I don't need to do this to get to heaven. If I do step out of this, I'm not going to be akin to witchcraft. You start to realize that a lot of other lies have been happening along the way. So in part, the sources say that Jim Bob doesn't want the kids to know what she's learned because he fears, according to my sources, that if the kids knew what Jill knew, they too would get upset, that they too would be frustrated. He wouldn't be able to control the narrative. He wouldn't be able to control the image of the family. And my sources says it all comes down to Jim Bob and his image. I know we've talked about this a lot on this channel, but I cannot reiterate to you more than anything that Jim Bob's obsession with how he feels about himself and how the world thinks of him is his number one priority. Many of his former friends and people around the Duggars have all said that he is motivated so heavily by his image, his fame, his power, and his wealth. And part of that means he has to have a specific image to sell what it is that he is to people in order to make his business go, or as some say, the show must go on. So with him being so focused on his image and how he appears to the outside, he wants to control every aspect of his life so that nothing can fracture that. But underneath that, I'm told there are a lot of secrets that are being kept by Jim Bob, and part of it is just a fear that if the public knew what was really happening, or a fear that if the public really understood the depths of what was going on in the house, that the proverbial jig would be up. The Duggars' life is definitely anything but idyllic, according to the people I've talked to. I know they'll say, like, we're not perfect people, but if I can impress anything on you more than anything, the people I've spoken to describe a house that is extremely high control, that has a lot of rules, and where kids don't have really any freedom. So if you're thinking of how hard it was to be Jill and how much she would have had to have accomplished to break free, it's astounding. And when I asked some people why you think Jill was able to ask questions and was able to actually confront her father, They all said that they believed that Derek was not buying Jim's, whatever Jim was selling. He sort of saw right through what Jim was doing. He saw that what was happening was his wife was being exploited, their family was being exploited, that his wife's trauma was being exploited, that he didn't think it was fair that Jim Bob wouldn't pay them for their time on the show when they're literally working and can't take any other job opportunities, so how do they afford their life? He also has strong disagreements with him about their legalistic cult. Jim Bob and Derek did not agree about the IBLP. Derek wanted nothing to do with the IBLP, I'm told. Derek didn't grow up in that world and wanted nothing to do with it. Derek went to public school, Derek went to college, and Derek now has a law degree. So he hasn't passed the bar. I was told that he did sit for the bar, but he failed. And he still plans to take the bar again, but given that everything happened around the time that the bar was happening, I really can't say I'm surprised. I'm sure when things calm down and he really can focus, he'll have no problem passing it. So Derek, differentiating factor here. The reason why they say that you're not going to see the same things from Joy and Jessa is because one, Austin Forsythe is from this world and heavily invested in all of it. He speaks like the Duggars, he talks like the Duggars. Jessa is married to Ben. Ben, for all intents and purposes, might not be a legalist like the Duggars, but they say that he's also sort of a groupie in a way, like he was enamored by Jessa. He met her because he saw her on the show. He wanted to be with her because of what he saw. And so for Ben, he's more willing to go along with things, and Jessa is willing to go with the status quo. Now, he has taken a position as a pastor, and so he will maybe be able to get a little bit further away. As you've noticed, Jessa's starting to wear pants, so there's a little bit of separation there, but still not very much. And when it comes to Jeremy and Ginger, the people are really actually sort of like torn. Like, on one hand, they believe that Ginger has been freed from Jim Bob's control, but then on the other hand, there's a lot of distrust around Jeremy, and I don't know what it is. Like, no one will actually say what it is about Jeremy that they don't trust. There's just something about Jeremy that people say, oh, I don't really know. I'm not sure what it is. Like, I just don't trust him. I'm learning so much, and these are their opinions. They don't trust Jeremy. Ben is apparently kind of someone that maybe wanted some fame. I don't know. And Jill dared to ask Jim Bob questions, and she was shunned and labeled dangerous. When I asked the sources, I said, well, what do you think about Jill and Ginger, or Jill being labeled the dangerous one when Josh is the one doing these things and he's not labeled dangerous? And they said it's just a pattern of behavior with Jim. That even though at one point Josh was not safe to be around the kids, he'll never call Josh dangerous. He'll never say Josh is a danger to the world. It's easier because Josh will go along with Jim Bob's narrative. Josh doesn't push back on what Jim Bob wants. You're only dangerous to Jim Bob, according to my sources, if you ask questions. And it's when you say no and you start asking questions that my sources say your communication with the Duggars ends, your relationship ends, and they move on and they do their best to, they say, smear, spread rumors, and ruin reputations. So again, this is the point of view from the sources. I would think it would be extremely disingenuous of me to say that the Duggars have not commented on this, and the Duggars likely will not comment. In fact, the Duggars will simply say that they are likely working towards restoration with Jill and hope that they can eventually come back to a place of healing. And I'm sure they would deny that any of this happened. So that's, I'm guessing, what their opinion would be. So there's the Duggar side, there's this side, and you guys can decide what you believe. But Jill Duggar was allegedly labeled dangerous. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Bye, guys.